Hey, what's up, everybody? It's MJ. Welcome to Before the Pour 20 Questions with MJ. My guest today is author, chief wine critic, and James Beard Award winner, New York Times, Eric Asimov. Eric is the author of How to Love Wine, a memoir and a manifesto that was published by William Morrow, as well as Wine with Food, pairing notes and recipes from the New York Times, written with recipes by Florence. Forgive me.
Fabricant.
Fabricant. See, I was going to say it just seemed too easy, but there it was. It's exactly as it is spelled. And published by Rizzoli, Sans Isles. And his weekly column appears in the food section of the Times. A collection of his columns included in the New York Times Book of Wine, published by Sterling Epicure. Welcome, Eric. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, that covers it. Great to be here.
Awesome. So to warm us up a bit, I'm going to start by asking you some personal questions. They're not too personal. Followed by James Lipton's famous 10 questions that he closes out inside the actor's studio with. So the key is to answer them quickly. First thing comes to your mind. Ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What is your favorite book?
I don't have one favorite book. I mean, I'm reading all the time. I read a lot of history. I read a lot of mysteries and thrillers. Is Shakespeare a book? I don't know. It all goes back to that.
Okay, the Book of Shakespeare.
Shakespeare, the Bible,
Yeah.
Moby Dick.
Okay, so we're going to try number 2. What's your favorite movie?
Casablanca or The Godfather.
Classics.
Yes.
Okay, who is your favorite musical artist?
Bob Dylan.
Okay. What's your favorite food or thing to eat?
Pasta.
Nice. I love it. In a world of keto freaks, somebody just wants some carbs.
Yeah, forget it. I mean, I tend to think of a meal rather than just one food.
Right,
So,
right.
I mean, that would be a course.
Gotcha. The secundi. Who's your favorite athlete?
That's such a good question, and it will date me, but I'll say Joe Namath, because I'm a lifelong Jets fan,
Oh, my
the
God.
dog-ass Jets.
That so sucks. I was
And-
born in
and-
68,
and-
so I kind of have
and-
that curse with you, man.
Well, I was very young, but I do remember sitting on the floor in front of my parents' bed watching on the black and white TV as the Jets won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And that memory has stayed with me for 50 years. Is that all it is? More than 50
my
years
God.
now.
But Broadway Joe is a good one, man. I think people need to, some of these old school athletes like
And
Clyde.
that was the best time to be
Yeah,
in
the
New York
70s,
sports.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
we
yeah.
had Clyde, Pearl
Yep,
Willis.
yep. Good stuff. So what was your favorite cartoon as a child?
Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
I mean, everything I know in life, I learned from Bugs Bunny.
Like so many of us. All right. What was your favorite cereal? Did you eat cereal while watching cartoons?
I haven't eaten cereal in years. I don't eat cereal.
Okay.
No,
All right. You don't
yeah.
eat cereal?
I don't eat
This is
cereal.
getting good. Okay, so this.
Does oatmeal count?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I hardly eat oatmeal. My wife likes it, so I eat it once in a while. But
He's like, that's not your preferred carb. I'm going to go pasta. I'm not.
No.
Yeah. What's your current exercise routine? Because I know everybody's trying to stay in shape because of COVID.
Man, for the last almost 25 years, I've been training at a dojo, and of course that's out because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing Zoom HIIT classes every other day.
Okay. What martial art do you study?
Tomiki Aikido, Kokuru Jiu-Jitsu, and Karate, a cross-training.
Okay. Wow. He's a triple threat. Don't mess with the wine critic from the New York
No, I
Times.
wouldn't advise it.
That would not be good. Who is your favorite comedian?
Oh, man, my favorite comedian, Richard Pryor, I guess.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Richard. All right. And who would you most like to have a bottle of wine with?
Aside from Bob, aside from Dylan. Yeah, he put his name on a bottle of wine about 15 years ago, and I spent like the next 5 years calling his manager and asking if Bob was ready to talk about wine with me yet, and basically the answer was not a chance.
Okay, Bob.
So-
If you stumble upon this on Spotify or Apple
But other than that,
Podcasts-
my wife.
okay. Oh, wow. That's a good answer. No one's ever said that. That's a great answer.
We have so much fun together.
We got so much to unpack. Okay, so now we're gonna do the 10 famous questions based on the Proust questionnaire. So, what is your favorite word?
Myriad.
What is your least favorite word?
Everybody.
What turns you on?
I just love discovering new things, trying new things that I never imagined would be any good or would be interesting, and finding that in fact it's something fascinating.
Love it. Discovery. I love that. What turns you off?
Dismissal. People who just categorically will dismiss a thing, a person, a people, an idea, because they're closed-minded.
Got it. Okay, what sound or noise do you love?
I love the guitar. I love the saxophone too.
What?
Well, I love I love guitar through tube amplifier. I love analog music.
Okay, good answer. See, this is the fun stuff. This is the fun stuff, kids. What sound or noise do you hate?
I don't really like angry shouting very much.
Got it. Yeah, got it. So abrasive, right? It really is. All right. What is your favorite curse word?
You know something? I have to amend that.
Okay,
You
back up.
I just can't stand the sound of Trump's voice anymore.
Oh.
I mean,
Cheers. Cheers. Yeah, wow. I want to shut it down, but I can't. We got more questions. That's so good. All right. What is your favorite curse word?
Motherfucker's pretty good.
It is a good one.
I like that.
Yeah, that is a good one. That's mine.
Mofo.
Yeah. MFN. Mother with an A.
Motherfucker.
Yeah. Martha with a O. Yeah. I kind of got a little when I first got on Instagram. I got a little. I was well known for going like Howell Mountain motherfucker or Mount Veeder motherfuckers, and the wineries are like, yeah, mountain fruit. Don't fuck with mountain fruit. What profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt?
You mean in terms of fantasy?
Yeah.
Musician.
I was gonna say you want to be touring with Dylan. I get it. What profession would you not like to do?
Professional wrestler.
Oh my God, this is gonna be fun. And lastly, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome.
That was awesome. That was fun. And if you want more of Eric, and I know you do, tune into our episode of the Black Wine Guy Experience. Until then, cheers.
Is it possible to turn down the volume? The headset.
Go grab Miles. We'll take a quick pause. Yeah, no worries.
questions are hard.
I suspect it might be right here, but I'm not going to touch it. I'll have him come in. Because you're plugged in here, so I suspect it's probably there. We'll let him go. Yeah, well, it's funny when you're on the spot. So he's going to turn down the volume in his earphone. Okay. I'm going to talk, so let me know when this is, if this is good for you, Eric. The volume. How's the volume now in your headphones?
It actually did he do something?
Yeah.
It sounds better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. So I'm just going to intro you again. And okay.
Asimov.
Asimov. Yeah.
No worries.
Asimov. Okay. Hey everybody, what's up? It's MJ, and welcome to the Black Wine Guy Experience. My guest today is author and chief wine critic of the New York Times, Eric Asimov. He is also a James Beard Award winner of at large. Was it People Who to Know?
It's I guess it's membership in their who's who. So
Okay.
it's not an award for a particular article or something. I guess it shows I'm getting old and I've got some kind of lifetime achievement.
Well, it shows it's like they were like, you're too dope not to be recognized. So Eric is the author of How to Love Wine, a memoir and a manifesto. It's published by William Morrow, as well as Wine with Food, Pairing Notes and Recipes from the New York Times, written with recipes by Florence Fabricant and published by Rizzoli. His weekly column appears in the food section of the Times. A collection of his columns is included in the New York Times Book of Wine, published by Sterling Epicure. Welcome, Eric. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I hate to say, a short paragraph sums up a life, but that's good.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Thank you for being here. And tell us about the wine. Tell me about the wine we're drinking tonight.
Well, this is one of the stranger wines I have at home, and I have to say I've never actually had this vintage, but I recently wrote a column on so-called noble grapes, and how I think this hierarchy of grapes is a bad thing, because it privileges wines made from grapes that are familiar or been grown in the area where the gatekeepers live. And it suggests that there are limits on what you can do with other less familiar grapes. And I think that, we've had ample evidence that you can make great wine from any number of grapes, and you don't have to create a caste system around, the same 6 French grapes plus 1 German grape. A lot of it depends on the attitude of the grower and where do you plant these? How much love do you give them? How seriously do you take it? So this comes from Germany, the Pfalz region, the northern part, which is kind of the anonymous part of the Pfalz. And I've never even said the name of this grape out loud before, so forgive me.
It's okay.
German speakers, if I'm mispronouncing it.
I mess shit up all the time.
It's the Portugieser grape.
Okay.
And this historically was just used to make kind of bad sweet red wine that sold for nothing. And so in the US nobody's heard of it, and in Europe those who have heard of it despise it because they've just seen what kind of bad wine it makes. But this guy, Andreas Durst, who basically, he's really a photographer who happens to have a couple of acres of grapes, and he is drawn to the others, the things that people say can't be any good. So he plays around with them, and he makes a little of this. And I think it's just a really it's a very mild grape. It's not particularly high acid, and I love high acid wines, so it's a little unusual for me. But it's refreshing, and it's got this kind of mineral-y quality that I like very much.
Yeah, and it's like because as you first referenced, like I'm looking for a reference point, and it kind of reminds me somewhere some type of Cru Beaujolais. I'm getting a little funkiness, a little earthiness, some berries. And because it's so foreign, I mean, my mind is going somewhere, and that's what I'm getting from it. Just like you could probably chill this. It's it's not as crunchy. It doesn't have the acid of some of that, but
you could imagine it with a little bit more acid.
Yeah.
But this it's a little bit it's kind of a natural wine in the sense that you look at it and it's not filtered, it's not pristine or bright. It's not I don't know. I imagine he uses a little SO2, but I don't even know that.
Eric brought the mystery wine. I love it,
and we're still mystified by it.
Exactly.
But I think it's actually it's really delicious. I mean, you can drink this as a vin de soif, or you can even ponder it a little bit because it does have this interesting mineral quality.
Very nice. Well, thank you for this is most people, we've had all, I guess, have brought great wines. It's going to be hard to outfunk this one. This one is definitely funky. It's unique.
Well, it's not funky in the sense that there's not
bad,
it's not mousy or barnyardy, but
it's not funky like, this Bordeaux, like where sometimes
it's funky in a good sense.
Yeah, it's funky like Take Me to Funky Town, like Parliament Funkadelic funky.
Yeah.
So, well, again, so glad to have you. And we've already started geeking out on wine, but before we get into that even deeper, I read you're from Long Island, from Bethpage, and that
I was born there. I never actually lived there.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Fucking Wikipedia.
I've never read my Wikipedia entry. I do know that it was originally put in there by my then 10-year-old son.
Oh, my God.
So who the hell knows what it says?
That's awesome. Well, for what it's worth, I've gone to pages and they're like, there was no issues of veracity on the page.
Yeah.
It seemed pretty, it wasn't like this page is missing information. So he did a good job. He at least got you off to a good start. So you're born in Bethpage, but writing, it runs deep in your family. Is that correct?
Yeah. My uncle was Isaac Asimov, who's known for his science fiction and his science writing, and a lot of other stuff. Sometimes people have come up to me and said, "Oh, your uncle, he's the one who wrote that book about jokes," and I'm like, yeah, he did do that, but everybody else knows him as the science fiction author.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's so cool. Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, oh, it makes sense, but you don't, I read your article. I read your articles. I don't know you. So
my father was a writer too.
Right, I saw that. Yeah, Newsday, right?
He worked for Newsday for 40 years. He started as a reporter there and eventually became an executive. My sister's a reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle. Yeah.
What does your not any longer 10-year-old son do for a living?
Well, he's my younger son. He just got his PhD in musicology from Cambridge in the UK.
Glad I asked that question.
Yeah, and he's he's like dealing with COVID and Brexit and lockdowns and trying to navigate. He's doing a postdoc right now in Brussels, and after that he's gonna do 3 more years at Cambridge.
Okay,
so he's chosen an academic life.
Wow. That's awesome. So, because of your dad and your uncle, did you find that writing came naturally, or was it you were just immersed in it, so you just began to perfect the craft at an early age? And
I was drawn to it, and maybe that just comes because you see the people around you, and you want to do what they do. To a certain extent. I actually never wanted to work for a newspaper. I was like my son Peter, I was drawn to academics, but then I kind of decided this was in the mid 80s, and I remember I was in American Studies. I was in a PhD program, and there were all kinds of stories about the death of the liberal arts then as now.
Yeah,
they never
I
actually
used to work
die,
in education. I was
but
like, that's still
but the
going on.
jobs dry up. And what my son is doing is courageous. I was neither as talented as he is nor as brave, so I thought, I'm not going to be chasing 1-year jobs and trying anywhere I can get them and live in places I don't want to live. I have to figure out something else to do. So. Having a family background in journalism meant that I had been absorbing, the ethos of the newsroom at the dinner table every night for my whole life up to that point, and I was able to get a job in journalism. And
so I was thinking about this, like, and we live in a different world. We'll talk about that more, where influencers and blogs, but like. You grew up like in the heyday of like real journalism like that, where people went to news was the newspaper.
I mean, this is
not some shit they read on the internet. Like
no, Woodward and Bernstein. There was an entire generation of investigative reporters were inspired, by this model, and journalism came to be seen as a respectable profession. And I'm not sure that it was when my father went into it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. Because everything's cyclical, right? So like,
But it was, I probably felt, I didn't want to do what my father did.
Right.
And,
I mean,
here I am.
My dad worked at the post office. Obviously, I didn't want to do what he did, and I love him, and he took good care of us. But but it's just that thing, right? Sons don't. You definitely don't want to do what you.
No, it's funny. My my sister and I both ended up doing that. My sister intentionally and me unintentionally, and my two kids. I mentioned Peter, my older boy Jack has his degree in urban planning, and he's kind of stymied by COVID here. He was just hired by the city Department of Transportation, and we'll see where that goes after the pandemic.
Yeah. So, what did you see? Now we could do the whole podcast on where you went to college. I should have an honorary degree from Wesleyan.
Oh yeah,
I spent so much time there. I spent so much time there. There wouldn't even be. I wouldn't even know why. I wouldn't even be in the wine business, but for dating women who went to Wesleyan.
Yeah.
So it's always a girl involved. So you went to Wesleyan.
Yeah.
Which I just a gush on Wesleyan. People, it's like this little powerhouse school. Like people don't realize how many influential people have come out of there in so many fields. Like film. Journalism, just general writing of books. Hamilton. I mean, people don't realize. I mean, like this is like
it's a great school.
Yeah.
So I loved it.
I did too. I mean, literally, I
you will get no argument from me on the attributes of Wesleyan women.
Listen, I know. I spent so much time that literally people like. I like had a meal card almost.
Were you in the neighborhood or?
No, I went to I was in the neighborhood. I went to Southern Connecticut down in New Haven.
Okay.
But I only transferred there because my girlfriend went to Wesleyan. I knew I couldn't get into Wesleyan, and people like they were like, "You don't go here?" Like later at graduation, like, "You don't go here?" I was like, "No, man." I even wrote some articles for the newspaper because my girlfriend was a sports writer and she didn't. I was like, I'll write it. So, what did you major in? What did you major in at Wesleyan?
History and American Studies.
Okay. So, like you said, we had a conversation before the pour, and he was saying how he likes to read a lot of books, and he's a fan of history. So that would make sense.
And I have to say that. I'm not a historian, but I always think in terms of history and both the critical thinking that you get from studying history and the understanding that nothing is in a vacuum and it's always connected to the past. I think it's helped me a lot.
Oh yeah, I mean, what we went through the past 4 years, I'm sure being grounded in history kind of. You know, and see, and this the thread that goes way, way back that was never addressed that people don't want to address. Like people are like, what? Why are people upset? Like because we had a war for control of the country, and one side lost, and they never let go of it. So yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So what was your first job in journalism? Where'd you work first?
Well, after I had graduated, I took some time off, and with my girlfriend at the time, we got a Eurail pass, and
I know what that. I'm old enough. I know what that is. That was like that was like for $200 or whatever it was. You could go.
You could
train
go
all
anywhere for months.
Yeah,
and we did that, and I came back and was applying to graduate schools, and I got a job in. This was my introduction to journalism. I got a part-time job as an editor at the Hartford Courant.
Okay.
And
I know that paper.
you know, I mean, I was like a 22-year-old kid, you know, going to work in my Birkenstocks and my long hair, but I learned some I got some pretty rigorous training there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they taught me how to, you know, how a story ought to be constructed, and I probably got the best piece of advice on writing there. Somebody said to me, never listen to the fucking idiot sitting next to you. and from that, you know, you learn.
That's a gem, people. That is a gem right there.
You don't say like, oh, you know, who won that battle or whatever. Right. You have to look it up.
Right.
You got to look it up and learn it for yourself.
Yeah. And you know, to that point, like, and what's the catch-22, right? It's like I used to work with high school students, and I'd be like, are you kidding me? Google it. Like, I used to have to actually go to a library and cross-reference stuff. You know, Google it. But that being said, the veracity, so you have to check the sources. Like, if it's like, you know, you want something that says .edu, or you want a reputable source, because people just see the first result and then they think it's the gospel, right? So I would add, don't listen to that idiot on the internet that came up the number one in the search results unless you know that they're a legitimate source. So that's for all our influencer friends listening. I shouldn't take pot shots at the influencers, but I can't help it. I don't like that term. So
aren't you an influencer?
That's what they call me. I know. That's what they call me. I'm like, I'm just a guy with a voice. And I mean with a voice, not like I have a voice. I mean like I have a nice voice.
You can't help it if people listen to you.
Right. So you worked at Hartford Courant, and I'm just going to pause right there because you spent some time in Connecticut. Obviously, you went to Wesleyan and Hartford. What's your pizza place in New Haven? New Haven Pizza. And you're also a food writer, wine writer. What's your New Haven pizza spot?
Well, I like Carbone's and Modern.
Modern. There it is. People don't know. That's the legit.
That's the other one.
Yeah. Modern is the one that gets like, everybody knows Sally and Pepe's.
Or Pepe, sorry. Yeah, I was thinking of Hartford. Pepe's. Yeah. Pepe's and Modern.
Yeah. That's awesome. That is so good. So whenever someone is pizza comes up and I have an opportunity, I'm going to take a pizza question, pizza jab, find out, probe your pizza knowledge of real good pizza. All right, so I read somewhere in the research that then you worked in Chicago.
Well, I was in Hartford only long enough to get all my grad school applications in, and I went to I then went to grad school at UT Austin.
Oh, yeah. How was that?
And I loved Austin.
Yeah, I could see you love. I loved Austin.
So great.
I loved Austin in 2015. I can only imagine what it was like in the mid 80s. I mean,
it was just fantastic.
I went to law school with a kid. This was in '92, and he's like, Marvin, I know you're from New York, but you gotta go to Austin. You'll love it. And that was like '93, and I didn't go to 2015. So I can only imagine in the 80s because, I mean, it's just grown so much. But even now, it's a fun city. But
it's probably true that no matter when you get to Austin, somebody's going to tell you, oh, yeah, you should have been here 10 years ago when it was really great. Right. You know, so But I loved it there until I finished with grad school, and I went off to Chicago
Okay.
and got a job at the Sun-Times, and that's where I was going to start figuring out what to do with my life. And
You're way ahead of me. I think I'm figuring it out on these podcasts.
So I was working there, and 3 weeks after I was hired, Rupert Murdoch bought the newspaper, and there was a clause in the union contract that said if there's a change of ownership and you leave the newspaper within a certain short amount of time, you would get some enormous severance payment. And so like an enormous percentage of the staff just left.
I was going to say, I guess you guys, and we're not talking if you like pina coladas, Rupert Murdoch. We're talking Fox News.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, there was no Fox News. He was just primarily known in this country as the owner of the New York Post, which, had gone from this sort of staid New York newspaper to this rag.
Yeah.
And suddenly I was thrust into a position of doing jobs that I had no business doing because, I was one of the few people who, had no incentive to leave.
Right.
And so I got an education there, but it's really hard to work for somebody like Murdoch that wants things to read a certain way.
What level? What grade level is it typically written at?
Well, it's not so much the grade level as it is the political slant.
Got it.
So you're going to publish a newspaper that pushes a conservative point of view.
Right. Got it. And then I think, and that's, I mean, I don't know, I'm not, but that's kind of almost like anti-journalism. That's not doing the work and actually evaluating. I mean, it's, and we have kind of seen where that road has taken us,
Yeah, I mean, it's back then, there was a consensus about, what truth was or what reality was. Now that's long gone. So I was there. I ended up being there less than a year because I loved Chicago, but I just couldn't take work in at that newspaper for so long. And so I applied for a job at the Times because it's my hometown newspaper, and I was kind of surprised, but they hired me.
That's so funny. And what year was that?
That was 1984.
Okay. Which,
So,
I mean, look at all the connections. You're surprised they hire you. Look at your dad's background. Look at your uncle's background. But then my mind goes to, and then it was 1984. George Orwell and your uncle was into science fiction. It was like it was ordained, man. It had to be. And so when you first started at the Times, what was your first beat?
Well, I was hired as an editor. So I was
Okay.
an editor in national news. And my passion, though, was food and wine, food and beverages, I'll say. And so one of the first jobs that I had there was I was in charge of the late night report, which meant I would come in at 7:30 at night and hang out until like 11, and then everybody else would go home, and then I would be in charge just in case something happened in national news, and my job was to get that into the paper, and maybe there would be breaking news that would have required updating through the course of the evening, and then at 3 in the morning I'd go home.
Okay.
So effectively that meant 3 nights a week I would have not much to do, and then 2 nights there would be mad activity. And I thought, okay, well, what maybe I can, because I wanted to write. I didn't want to be an editor. What can I do? And then I realized that since I was on staff, I could pitch stories to the food section without, being laughed at. And I started sending over story ideas, and I'd report during the day and write it from midnight till 3 if I had nothing else to do.
What was the what was the first story that they liked your pitch and they printed? Remember?
Well, yeah. At that time, I think the first story I did was why is it that everybody says draft beer is better than bottled or canned, but it's so often bad when you have it in a bar? I mean, this was just the beginning of the craft beer revolution.
Yeah, because Sam Adams was.
Sam Adams hadn't shown up in New York yet. Right. It was really a West Coast thing.
Oh, like the West Coast IPAs or stuff, or just.
Well, it wasn't even before IPA.
Wow.
I mean, this was like Sierra Nevada was just happening,
right.
and Anchor Steam, and all these things.
Oh, and what I have a friend who has a brewery in Jersey, and he was on a podcast. And wasn't it like hard to get Anchor Steam in Sierra Nevada? Like it was like bootleg. Like it wasn't readily available.
You couldn't
here.
really get it, and there were just at that time a couple of like a brew pub was opening in New York, and then there was another brand, New Amsterdam, that was just showing up, and so I thought, okay, we have a wine writer. I can't really pitch wine story, but nobody's writing about beer, so maybe I could do some beer stories. And I did a few beer stories. I did some other things that interested me personally, like, that was also a time where you had a new sort of ice cream parlor where they would break up little candy bars and put them in the ice cream, and you order and like, what the hell is a Heath bar? Nobody knows what that is, so I did a story on the Heath Bar, and wherever I could find a space, I made it for myself.
Yeah. I love that. That is so funny. It's so true though. But like, I love that how you just like, I want to write, so I can't write about wine right now, so I'll write about beer, and yeah, like I said, what are those things called? And it's so common now where they even have like a glass where they chop up and do your ice cream. Was it Cold Stone Creamery?
Right.
But you were there at the beginning of that.
I mean, this was the 80s, and the country was going through this food revolution, and it was just the beginning of interest in wine, and back then. I mean, we've turned sommeliers into superstars, and back then you might have a handful who might work in a fancy French restaurant, but that was it.
Right. I had a guest on, and he was saying, like, even back in, when he was in school, I mean, like in the late 90s, there was like 4 real somms, and they were like all French. Like it wasn't like
by the late 90s, I think it had expanded a little bit. So I started, I was doing these food-related stories, and then eventually I moved over to the food section full time. That was 88, 89.
Okay.
And then in 92, I started reviewing restaurants.
Right, and that was, you kind of, is it fair to say you invented like the, under 25 type, like...
Well, there were other publications doing that.
Okay.
And because other publications were doing it, I had been having this running argument for a while that the Times needed to be paying more attention to inexpensive restaurants, places in, outside of Manhattan, and for a long time there was resistance. We have a restaurant critic. We don't want to dilute the critical voice of the New York Times and blah 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 blah. That is at that time there was a lot of competition in newspapers. And there was you probably don't remember New York Newsday.
I know, I remember the name.
Started in the late 80s. The Long Island paper where my father had worked started a New York edition that was considered competition. Okay. They had a cheap restaurant reviewer, and so did the Daily News, and so did The Voice, and Robert Sietsema, who now writes for Eater New York, had this little newsletter, Down the Hatch, where he would mail it out to people in all the great diners, or where do you go for West African food or whatever. And so I've been pushing this idea, and then the Times finally said, well, okay, you do it. I said, yeah.
That's awesome. And so, like, what were some of your early discoveries? Like, so, like, to this day, I don't spend enough time in the outer boroughs, but I mean, like Queens is just amazing. Like the different ethnicity food. Like, was there something? What was like your article that, like, I don't want to say catapulted, but like really people were like, wow, this is interesting.
I just wanted to set myself apart at first. The first thing I did was on a little place called Green Avenue Grill in Fort Greene.
Oh, and that's when Fort Greene was Fort Greene.
That's
not gentrified. We're talking Spike Lee Fort Greene. We're not talking.
Yeah, that was Do the Right Thing era.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to show that, okay, like now we're going to pay attention to different areas, and then like a little Burmese restaurant somewhere, and so I think the first thing I did early on that I thought was really cool was writing about the Red Hook soccer fields. There were in Red Hook, Brooklyn, every weekend, all of these Central and South American people would gather and play soccer. And all of these food carts and food trucks would come out there, and you would have Venezuelan food or Colombian food and Mexican and all kinds of stuff, and it was just so great, and nobody would know about it unless you were among the players or their families and friends. So I learned that really what writing about restaurants in that way was really like a amazing course in the demographics and immigration patterns of New York City. You saw the waves of people coming in, the different parts of the city where they would settle, the restaurants that they would open up that were not intended for some, New York Times guy from Manhattan, but were just really for the immigrants to give them a taste of the foods that they missed. Yep. And, it was really the same thing as, 100 years before, some, little red check tablecloth Italian restaurant. And I found it so fascinating, and I did that from 92 to 2004, and I knew the city so well then. Now I don't know it at all. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I really like how you tied it. It makes so much sense, and that's common. Like, I live in Jersey, and like, you go to the soccer fields on Sunday, and it's all the immigrants from either Latin or South America, Central South America. The Haitians will have a team, and it's just all day, and it's this big thing. Same thing when I lived in New Haven, and but to the way you traced it to, like how they weren't trying to get any Michelin stars or anything. It was good home cooking, right? And this is just good food and good flavors that that you got to experience, you got to share with people. I think that's pretty profound that you were doing that and kind of really that whole melting pot in New York City. People were probably living in bubbles, and we still live in bubbles, but the fact that people decided to go out and experiment and try new foods based on what you wrote, that's pretty cool, man. At least I think it is.
I think the mayor, David Dinkins, had a phrase, gorgeous mosaic, that I think really represented the city. You had all of these ethnicities that they coexisted and were together, and People were very fluid, but people didn't lose their character or their pride or their culture.
Yeah. And so you wrapped that up, you said, was it 02 or 04?
04.
04, okay. All right, so that's a good time. We're going to pause. We have to take a quick break. And then we come back, we're going to talk about how you went from just that kind of food, 25 and under, and then got into wine. All right, so we'll just take a quick break. We'll be right back, everybody. All right, we're back. So how did you transition into wine? Like earlier you said, that you had to pitch beer stories because they had a wine writer.
Well, I was always fascinated with wine. And when I came to the food section in 88 or 89, we had a wine columnist, Frank Prile, who a lot of people don't remember now, but he was one of the first weekly on-staff wine columnists for an American newspaper. He started like in 72 or something like that. And, Frank was a super smart, cultured guy. He spoke French, but he affected, the kind of rough and tumble foreign correspondent, a guy who liked to traipse through the Khyber Pass and, knock back a few. And, he acted as if writing about wine was sort of like, to use a word that somebody might have used in the 80s, effeminate, and he professed, to not really be into it, and he'd rather be, covering crime or the UN or something like that. So I, after hanging out with him, I said, look, Frank, I've got a great idea. Let me trail you for 6 months or so. You can introduce me to people. You can teach me things, and then I'll take over wine, and you can do whatever you want. And he didn't talk to me after that for 2 months, and I realized actually that he loved that job, and it was all a front. So. Okay, so he occupied the chair, and I did other things, but I always loved wine. And in 1999, my editor asked me if I wanted to write a little tasting column every week, and I said, yeah, absolutely, because Frank doesn't want to make recommendations. He wants to do whatever he wants to do. Sure. And so I did that for the next few years until right around the time of 9/11, which was around the time that Dottie and John at the Wall Street Journal were getting very popular, and our publisher, Arthur Sulzberger, said, well, they've got this Dow Jones wine report. Why can't we have the New York Times wine panel? And Frank didn't want that, and I didn't really want that either, but we had to have it. So we started that, and he was writing it, and he had some illness, so I took over writing it, and he eventually retired in 04, and then I became the wine critic.
Okay. And then, so you said you always loved wine. Like, when did you fall in love with wine? Like, was it just like a bottle of Beaujolais when shared on a U-Rail train, or was it like some type of crazy Swiss native varietal? With
Well, I'm going to back up even farther. I was 14 years old, and my parents took me to France for their first trip and my first trip.
And that's a good age because you full on remember.
No, it was a terrible age because it was the summer and I had my first girlfriend.
Oh, yeah. Well,
and suddenly, you go from this sort of, exciting quasi-adult, life full of hormones flying everywhere, and then like your parents drag you along on
I
their
love
trip,
it's
and
so
we're kidding.
it's always about a girl or boy, and like so I love. He's like, it's 14. Like I'm
So-
like, you can remember it. He's like, no, man. Becky Sue was at home, man.
So, I mean, I was like the proverbial sullen teenager, and my mother got really sick of me, and my father was going to lunch with some friends, newspaper friends of his who worked at the International Herald Tribune, and she said, take him with you. So I went to lunch at a bistro in Paris. And this was like a formative experience for me because I had, this was the 70s and American food was still like instant coffee and TV dinners.
Tang.
And,
Not even orange juice, Tang. Who thought
and
that
here,
one up?
I'll never forget this, the lunch, entrecôte and haricot vert and dauphinoise. And, of course, they were drinking some bottle. I don't know what it was, but they gave me a little bit.
Right, because that's what's very common. That's still
Yeah.
common in Europe, and it's just you're having wine with lunch. Yeah.
And so, and my parents were not really wine drinkers. There might be on a Seder or Thanksgiving, some holiday, but there was not a bottle on the table every night. And I thought, oh my God, I have to have this experience all the time. This food is so good. And I kind of put together the food and the wine and the conviviality, and it all became sort of an ideal for me. And I became, one of those, like an annoying kid who you couldn't walk down a street in New York because I'd have to stop and look at every menu that was posted on the restaurant door. And, eventually I got into wine as well because it was just so good with food. And this is not a path towards connoisseurship or anything. It was just like, we're students. After my first year, I always lived in a house, and we cooked for ourselves, and we had a bottle of wine, and it might have been Matus Rosé or some other.
Hey, Matus Rosé has been on the podcast before.
It might have been just. It was more often just some cheap French wine that came in. 1,500. We didn't call them magnums then. It was just like big bottles because they were cheaper. Minervois wine or something.
Yeah, those appellations that are still underrepresented, in the whole, like you talked about, which you guys, when we released the Before the Pour about the noble grapes, but there's so many grapes out there that, Côte de Rhône. How cheap was Côte de Rhône until recently? Côte de Rhône was like dirt cheap. It's still not that bad.
Beaujolais.
Yeah.
I just wrote a column about, Beaujolais that, it's like, $40 a bottle and people are freaking out. But, that's what, there's a little tariff add on there.
Yeah, there's that. And also, it's been a long time, people. So things go up, but it's I think those are still some of the best values, right? Like a $40 Cru Beaujolais, man, you're probably going to get a better hit than a $300 Burgundy that you don't know if you can even afford a $300 Burgundy. You know what I mean? You're going to get a more, even though those wines are so handcrafted, it's probably going to be more consistent and more.
Well, I'm one of those people who says that the inconsistency of Burgundy is way exaggerated.
Okay.
My argument is that all wines are inconsistent. Every genre of wine has its good producers and bad producers.
You make a very good point.
And it's just kind of a cliche about Burgundy, and maybe it was more true 25 years ago, but certainly in the last 15 years or so.
So
I don't believe it.
And that's one of the things I know you a couple weeks ago, and it wasn't too far ago, you did a whole 20 wines under $20 or something like that.
Yeah, that's a regular series that I do, and I'm gonna preach for a moment.
Preach.
This is the greatest time in history if you love wine. I mean, there's more different wines from different styles and in different grapes of better quality than ever in history. And, it's really a sad thing that ordinary consumers, wine-loving consumers, can't afford a good Burgundy anymore. And it's getting so we can't afford good Cru Beaujolais anymore. And that's really sad. But the good, on the good side is that there's so much else out there. And we're lucky. I'm lucky to live in New York, which maybe is the best place in the country, if not the world, to see this.
Right, particularly from the European side with all that's going on, right? You know what I mean? Like, it makes it way out west, but like...
Well, also because, we're not a wine producing... we have we make wine in the Finger Lakes and on Long Island, but, historically we're more a crossroads of other people's wines.
Right.
And that's why, there's so much more diversity here than, say, in Paris, because... you have a long cultural tradition of just drinking French wines there.
Yep. So what have you, where would you throw some bargains out to people who haven't read any of your articles? Like where are you seeing some great values under $20 in the world of wine right now?
This is where you have to get on your kind of explorer's suit and be ready to go places that maybe you haven't heard about as being great for wine. So I have a column coming out tomorrow about Greek red wines. 25 years ago, there were no, if you wanted Greek wine, you had to go to Astoria. And what would you find there? The only thing people knew about Greek wine was don't drink Retsina. Then we started hearing about the white wines, Assyrtiko, Mascofilero, Rodita, all different kinds of Greek white wines, and they're wonderful, but nobody has spoken as much about the red wines. And the red wines are just great values, depending on, you have to select carefully, and that's what I try to do, offer some suggestions. But there are all these grapes that people don't know very well, and producers we don't know, and some of these wines are just delicious and different and distinctive, and they don't cost that much. We saw a similar thing in Sicily. Now those prices are going up a little bit as the wines get discovered.
Yep.
But
love Grillo. Love Grillo.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Spain, Portugal, especially Portugal
favorites.
is outside the tariff zone, and I think Portuguese wines are really coming into their own right now. And what's interesting is that it's not what creates this diversity is not just so-called New World wine regions. Oh, we bring in wine from Chile and Australia and Argentina and whatever. No, it's places in the historic wine-producing areas that for centuries have just been local wine producers. Right. Nobody knew about them, or if they were not ignored, they were kind of dismissed. The Jura, they make weird wines there,
right.
But now they're prized.
Yeah.
Different areas of Spain, Ribera Sacra.
Yeah, I find Spain so interesting because even at the high end, like a Vega Sicilia, like it's still like compared to like first growth Bordeaux, it's still a value. I mean, like, it's just a good wine, just lasts just as long, even better. And just because it's from Spain, I mean, collectors know, but by and by, when I told someone, like, I remember when I first started in the business, 97, 98, I was working over at Sparrow in Hoboken, and Protocola was $3.99 as a tempered, delicious for $3.99. Like, if it had been from California, it'd have been a $20 bottle of wine, right? You know what I mean? And I love California wine, but that's just economics, right? So I think Spain over delivers. I really want to get more into Portuguese wines this year. I had a few of them, but it is exciting. I think, but people have to be willing to step outside of Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Grigio, Chardonnay. You have to, and try. Like it's what I love about wine, and I get this from you is like it's never ending. I'm never going to learn it all. It just keeps you going. There's always going to be something new to learn and something exciting. And you don't have to like everything, but you can experience things, and that's how I think you expand your palate is by trying things.
Yeah, the more things you drink, the better idea you have of what you like, the less intimidating a wine list becomes because you're not afraid of it. You know, you're become more comfortable saying yes, I like that, or no, I don't like that. You know, rather than checking the score first to see if it's good.
Right, which I'm a fan of scores, but not for the reasons people think. I think they're if once you open up your palate, they can, and if you're they can be a guidepost. But I think there was a whole group of people who just wanted, they had money, they bought it because it was a high score. You know what I mean? But if I do like reading different reviews and writers like you, because then I triangulate and I find what I like for my palate. So I think there's a place for them. I just knowing what they when they really took off, and you look at the .com bubble, it was like, I just want a 100-point wine. I can sell wine. I can make a wine, it gets 100 points, and I could sell it for $500 a bottle. That was like there was a time, and that was just like,
well, you were making a commercial model. Judgment.
Right. You know, so another thing that you do that I find wonderful, and I'm sure lots of people, is wine school. Talk a little about wine school.
Well, the idea of wine school was, it came out of a column I had written, I don't know, before high-speed internet and social media and so on.
Yeah,
and
he said high-speed internet.
Well, I mean, it's important to say that.
I know, because that was the term, right? It was like high-speed internet.
You know, because, you used to have that modem noise, and if you want to look up something, it would take like 5 minutes. It didn't.
No, it's so true.
So I wrote a column called Home Wine School. Here's how you learn about wine, because my philosophy has always been the best way to learn is to drink.
That's it.
And drink a lot of different kinds of wine so you can figure out what you like and what you don't like. And this is almost, this has to precede the reading and the class, because you just have to, ground yourself in wine and the varieties and just get accustomed to what's out there and what appeals to you and what doesn't. And I said, well, find a good wine shop, most important thing. Mm-hmm. Have them give you a mixed case. Mm-hmm. Drink a bunch of different wines, open one with dinner every night, every other night, once a week, whatever works. And just take note of what you like and what you don't like. And then go back and share your notes with the merchant and get another case and just kind of build on this. And maybe if you find you like a certain kind of wine, get a case of 12 different varieties of that wine, 12 different producers. And, slowly you kind of build your frame of reference up. Then a few years later, once we were in the age of high-speed internet, I thought, okay, well, maybe we could turn this into kind of an interactive column where instead of like suggesting a case that people should buy, I suggest three varieties of a particular genre of wine every month, and people go out and get that wine and drink it, and then we sort of virtually reassemble and talk about it. And this has basically been the idea. We've been doing that since 2014. Once a month, we look at a different kind of wine or grape or some other concept each month, and gather again and talk about it. And the idea, the underlying hope is that people sort of grow out of the need of scores and tasting notes and critics, and just kind of decide for themselves what wines do I like, what wines do I not like, and just develop a healthier, more comfortable relationship with wine.
So I remember one you did, and it was kind of, well, because I kind of jumped into the fray a little bit, but it was very polar. The supermarket wine you did.
Oh yeah,
Apothic. It was Meiomi, and what was the third one? It was Apothic.
The Prisoner.
The Prisoner, right? So, yeah, like. Let's kind of talk about supermarket wines for a second, because that one was hot, like on the Times website and on social media, like on Instagram. That was like hot. Like some people were mad that you mentioned those brands.
Yes.
Like what was that experience?
Well,
because that was a hot
the reason I did that is because one of the reactions I get every month, and pretty much with not just Wine School, every column I write is saying, well, we can't find those wine. You know, why can't we find them? Why can't you write about wines that everybody can find?
Right.
And, I've tried explaining that, we don't live in the United States as far as wine distribution goes. We live in 50 different countries where every state has their own rules, their own distributors, and it's virtually impossible, short of picking out mass-produced wines that are available in the equivalent of supermarkets.
Yep.
And so I finally said, okay, I will pick out wines that everybody can find. Here they are.
Yep.
Drink that, motherfucker.
Exactly right. You want some shit you can find? Here you go.
But that sounds mean, and I didn't want it. It wasn't passive aggressive really, because I also wanted to say, okay, what's the difference between wines that are carefully, conscientiously made by people who are perhaps stewards of the land, or maybe their family's been doing this for 200 years, or they're very idealistic in what they do. And how does that those are the usual wines we try to drink, and here we have processed wines.
Mm-hmm.
This is a product that is created to meet a preconceived flavor profile based on focus groups and on studies, and it's essentially like a processed food.
Yeah, it's like Coca-Cola. It's a formula.
Yeah, it's Fritos.
Yeah,
So and you put it on
Fritos are pretty simple, like corn and salt.
Right. Well, I don't know. It's like breakfast cereal.
Well, yeah. But yeah, no. To your point, like, I mean, what's interesting is, with The Prisoner wasn't that way at first. I mean, he bought leftover grapes.
Yes.
And he created a blend.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't, and then they were like,
it evolved to that.
Listen, that guy knows how to create a brand and sell it.
Absolutely.
Just like the Meiomi people.
Right. So as you said, there was an enormous reaction. On the one hand, people say, what the hell's wrong with you? How can you recommend wines like that?
Yeah, yeah.
And then on the other hand, there were people, finally, I've been drinking, Meiomi or Apothic
Red,
and I feel seen.
Right.
I'm recognized.
Right.
And the idea, I try not to be judgmental of people and their taste. If somebody likes Apothic and they're happy with it, that I'm not saying they're wrong.
Right.
But just as a critic, I have to assess the wine from my aesthetic point of view.
Yeah. And it's just it's very interesting, because people, I'm like, well, if you like red blends, and that's another thing. I'm like, red blends have been around since wine's been made.
Yeah.
Man.
Did you ever have a Bordeaux?
Yeah, exactly. I'm shouting up the pop. like you guys, like literally, we said it before. Like, as someone who studied marketing, I love marketing, but yet I hate it, because it's just the spin that can get put on things, and particularly in this world. Like, the spin. I was on a wine tasting yesterday, and when people say, well, we don't put any residual sugar. I'm like, well, people don't put residual sugar unless they're making a dessert wine, or unless it's a supermarket wine, right? So
if you put it in, it's not residual.
right, exactly. It's not exactly. That's that. It's part of the recipe. Yeah, and I remember that one because I had met a wine merchant down in Florida a few weeks before, and he started following me on Instagram, and like I said, okay, I'm going to join this wine study, and he like lit into me. He's like, why would you post that? And I was like, I remember something. New York City wine legend Steve Green worked with him at Acre City. He's like, Mr. Marvin, there's no accounting for taste. So if someone likes those wines, that's what they like. I don't have to drink them. I'm not going to judge you per se for drinking them. But I liked watching that unfold, and that is one of the things. Even with my Instagram, or like people are like, where'd you get that wine? I'm like, well, it's mailing list only. Like, oh damn, and I don't not doing that, but I'm a guy who have wine shipped to Connecticut because I can't get it in New Jersey and go pick it up. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm that guy, right?
Yes.
You're not going to be that vigorous, so just enjoy the tasting notes.
But it's funny. You realize, and I've realized it 100 times, that a lot of people are interested in wine critics mostly because they want to have their own taste validated.
Correct.
And
Correct.
It's it's one of the weird things about wine and criticism that you need this sort of this imprimatur, to validate somebody's own taste.
So, what I would say, let me back up in my mind. So we've seen a huge shift. We talked about it earlier in journalism and how news gets reported. You were a bit of an early adopter. You started a blog like in 2006, like a
Yes.
real journalist. What prompted you to do that?
My editor told me to. I mean, that's you have to understand that this is an institutional blog. It's not,
okay.
somebody doing something independently.
Gotcha.
It was housed on the Times
Okay.
website and moderated by the Times. So, but that also gave it kind of instant sway, and it was noticed by a lot of people. And I had a lot of fun with that, and I did it, I guess, from 2006 to maybe 2012, which was sort of the apogee of blogdom.
Yep.
Before social media
and vlogs, video,
Right.
started taking over. Yeah. That's cool. That's so funny. Because I've read articles about that. People editors you need to get on Twitter, to their reporters. Like,
Right.
You need to get on Twitter. Like, I don't want to be on Twitter. I want to be out investigating. Get on Twitter, So it's just interesting that you were told that. So,
I mean, I guess I was given a choice, but
well, yeah. I mean, exactly. You could either start a blog or start looking for a job. Start a blog. I don't know if it was that extreme, but that's the BWG humor guy. So he did not say that. So, like, what's it been like watching the rise of the SOM and social media?
Well, I think, I mean, I love sommeliers, and I think that sommeliers have done great things for wine. By being the very direct links to consumers. They can be incredibly influential and pass on their own discoveries and make subtle or not so subtle recommendations and in many different ways be helpful. And I think for people who came up in the 80s and the 90s, when you saw sommeliers began as something more to be feared. They were they would make you feel the depths of your ignorance with their
You
their
swine.
talk. They
You
would,
stupid fool.
they would be condescending. At least this was the stereotype.
Yes, right.
They would try to upsell you, and no, you had to protect yourself from them at all costs. No, in fact, they could be your best friend in a restaurant. Now that's a little bit separate from the question of social media, and
I mean, because I think it once the movie came out, and it just was when these new platforms came out, and younger people were taken to them, initially, it kind of coincides. So, like I said, yeah, there was a thing where I was a somm. I'm not certified. I sold on the floor of a restaurant. I sold wine on the floor of a restaurant in Santa Barbara. I would help people with the menu. It was a lot of fun. And to this day, I didn't consider myself a somm, but I was like, well, I guess that is the technical definition. You don't need the certification for it. But so I like how you handle that. So social media, you come on, like you're on Instagram. You're pretty active.
Yeah. Well, let me just back up to the somm for a moment, because I think that the issue of certification really became overdone and exaggerated. Possibly because of the movies and the influence of the court,
right?
And so on. And I think quite apart from the horrendous stories of the last
misconduct
couple of
abuse,
years, I'm not sure it's been good for wine culture. I think that sommelier is a restaurant job.
Yes.
And people get that certification so they can leave restaurants.
Right.
What does that mean? The idea that people who are interested in wine should pattern themselves after sommeliers, I think, is pernicious. I don't think the idea that people have to learn how to blind taste and guess what kind, not only guess what kind of wine it is, but what vineyard, what's a barrel, and all those bullshit. It's worthwhile, for professional reasons if you're in that business,
Sure.
but for ordinary consumers, I don't think it ends up creating more anxiety than it alleviates.
Yeah, and I would and people. I mean, again, blind tasting. These are things that aren't new. Blind tastings have been going on. Judgment of Paris was a blind tasting, right? Like, this is not a new. When I worked at Acker, sometimes they would do the wine. Sometimes we would do them blind, just for fun, not just for fun, just for the hell of it, But like now, right? It's become a thing. It's become, well, can you taste this blind? And as someone who has a degree he doesn't use, it becomes like, well, what are you seeking? So are you just gonna go out and taste 6 to 8 wines so you get your next certificate, or just like how I got my palate? I just taste everything. I just taste. That's like, it's what's it called? Street cred. It's the school of hard tongues, or whatever it would be called from all the tasting. So I think, like you said, these things can shine a light, but then what's the road we're actually going down? With them, and like you said, I tell people there's only so many sommelier jobs. There's only so many restaurants that hire sommeliers. So,
and who knows what that's going to be like going forward.
Oh, exactly. And then it also I'm not knocking anyone. However, this, like, you can go, there's stores where somebody's been working in the same retail store for 30 years, been going to every tasting, reads the same books, and you're going to go in with a recommendation from someone you don't know, and this guy be right in front of you and know a shit ton more about wine. And I think, because, like I said, as someone who has a degree they don't use, well, I got the degree, so they must know. Like, there's this assumption of knowledge that may not necessarily be there. And I just think a good retailer with someone who's been there even 5-10 years, who just loves wine, is going to give and is going to listen to you, and no agenda. Is just, what do you like? What did you like about it? And just ask you some simple questions. And like you said, with wine school, write down what you liked about it. That way you can go back and, well, I like this about it. And literally people don't get, I'm like, you don't have to say leather. You'd be like, it tasted really dry, or it tasted like cherries, or I didn't like it because it was bitter. And we can work from that,
Right.
you know? So yeah, so social. What do you see? What do you see going on there?
Well, I like Instagram a lot. It's just fun
It's
to
a fun medium.
communicate with people. There just seems to be less, vituperation than on Twitter.
Oh yeah, Twitter's just.
I haven't really. I use the tools that I have, but I haven't explored a lot of the other tools. I'm not on, TikTok.
You're not
or
TikToking, flossing?
Snapshot or Snapchat, or I've yet to enter a clubhouse.
Yeah, I was gonna say
but,
you could probably have a pretty big clubhouse, man. You could get that thing up to 100K pretty easily, bro.
Yeah, well, what's the point?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Where are you going with it? So this is what you do for a living. You're a wine critic, but do you ever get tired of being asked for wine suggestions?
Almost never. I mean,
Awesome.
that's what I'm supposed to do.
love it.
I mean, that's like, if you're a lawyer, people ask you about the law.
Yeah, but
If you're-
I went to law school. Most lawyers do not want to be lawyers anymore. They're like, oh, this shit sucks.
And that's another meme of restaurant and wine critics. They always want to tell you how hard the job. I mean, you don't understand. You think it's just fun going to restaurants and eating and drinking, but I have to eat, so much, and I have to go to restaurants every night.
Oh yeah, I see.
You just. I mean, no.
Right.
I
tell
mean,
people all the time.
it's the best. I mean,
yeah.
anybody, and when people complain about it, it's just a lie.
Right. I know exactly. Oh,
Either
damn.
that, or they just shouldn't be doing the job.
I got to taste 200 Bordeaux's
Right.
this week.
I mean, I'm not saying that's easy. That's
No, people-
that's
I tell
really
people-
kind of physically
It
challenging.
is. His palate fatigue is
But
real.
but I mean, given everything that people have to do to make a living, to complain about palate fatigue just seems like
no
really
more.
ridiculous.
I can't eat any more fagua. No more sauternes. Stop. I know it's truffle week. Stop. Yeah, it does become kind of. No more champagne and caviar. I can't. I just can't. I can't. So I mean, we kind of touched on this, but I want to maybe just kind of backtrack. And you talked about, but like, what are you finding most exciting about wine right now? Like, if you had to say, there's is it the diversity of wine available? Like, is it more people awakening? What excites you the most about wine?
It's definitely the diversity. I mean, that is just endlessly exciting to me, and to find a wine like that. I mean, you're not going to find in a restaurant or in a wine shop, a whole rack of great Portuguese.
No, you're not going to get five of them to compare.
But it might be that somebody somewhere tastes this wine and say, hey, that wine could be really good, and maybe somebody in Germany is going to say, maybe we have a real heritage with this grape here, and what if we really treated it well, like people are doing with Aligoté now.
Oh my God,
in Burgundy,
the other white Burgundy. Oof.
I mean,
so good.
I mean, it's very easy to dismiss it and say, oh yeah, it's a great wine as long as you put some creme de cassis in it, or whatever old joke you want to make.
Domaine Arlo. I mean, I've had so many good ones.
They can be really good. Maybe we don't really know what the limits are. Sylvaner is another grape that I really love and have had so many good versions of it but it's easy. It was easy to dismiss it because it's just in the hierarchy of Alsace or Germany, it was just not at the top. I mean, I love Riesling. Riesling's great, but it shouldn't be the only wine that they make in Germany, because Germany makes a lot of different wonderful wines. So, you know, just this to me is fascinating. And it's actually one of the great things that's happened in California over the last 15 years or so. What used to be a very diverse state in terms of the grapes that were grown, you know, then became very kind of, it went into that noble grape.
Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay. Let's just fucking say it, man.
Yeah,
Like,
and then, you know, there's some in Merlot and Pinot Noir, and then we'll throw Zinfandel in there. But there's a lot more.
You're pulling up Zinfandel vines. You're pulling up Petit Syrah vines. You're pulling up
Yes.
Italian varietals to plant shit. And the interesting thing, which was going to be my next question, you know, what do you see the impacts of climate change on the wine business, right? Because I think people are going to have to start changing the grapes they grow in regions because the climate is shifting.
Well, it's, you know, it's enormous. I mean, it's already been enormous, and paradoxically, a lot of the effect of climate change up till now has been beneficial. You know,
yeah, like in Germany, like they're able to make drier
Germany or Champagne or Barolo.
Yep.
I mean, all of these places, you know, where they would get maybe 3 good vintages in a decade, had it really good for the 90s and the first and the aughts.
Yeah, the aughts.
Is that how you say it? The aughts?
Don't ask me. I mispronounce shit all day, every day, but I think it is the aughts.
But, you know, we're now like, you know, we've gone past the tipping point, and now in Champagne you worry about overripeness, and same thing in the Lange, and in Germany. And I think, I mean, it's too soon to say, oh, we're going to have to change, you know, we can't grow Pinot Noir anymore in Burgundy. There's a lot of different viticultural steps that can be taken to try to mitigate the climate change. But one of the effects are these, you know, bizarre weather events, you know, hail and spring frosts and forest fires in California that are so destructive.
Mount Etna is erupting as we're sitting here doing this podcast.
Man, well, that's, you know, you can't attribute that to climate change, but
no, you can't. And it just reminds us that we are subject to the earth. You know what I mean? Like you know, it's a volcano, and they knew it was.
It
active.
always amazed me that people would like just kind of, you know, willingly put themselves, you know, you know, spewing distance of a volcano, and well, we're gonna live here, you know.
Oh my goodness, it's so true. So I mean, you've had so many successes in the business, and obviously it's beyond. You didn't start in wine, but was there ever a time when you were like, you know what, screw this, I'm done, I'm walking away, I'm going to go become a university professor or do something else?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I love what I do, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm privileged to work at a place like the New York Times that, you know, is one of maybe 3 newspapers in the entire country that has a on-staff wine critic, and also has the budget to you know, to pay for me to travel, and, you know, not to take junkets, not to accept gifts, not to write only about not to write about samples, but I can buy the wine that I want to buy to write about. That's just an enormous relief journalistically, that you're not beholden to people who are, you know, financing your career. And it's not. I understand that most wine writers have to depend on that, because there's no money in wine and there's nobody supporting them. And I'm just very lucky to have one of the few jobs where I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, really cool. And, you know, we have a little time for that. So like what, and it may not be because you had some, but was there a bottle of wine over the course of your career that just knocked your socks off? And it could be a DRC, or it could just be like, I had this bottle like you talked about in France at a bistro. Like, what is there a bottle of wine that just blew you away? It's like your death row wine.
Well, I mean, I think that I've had a life for me has been a never-ending series of epiphanies. I mean, I was in grad school in Austin when I had the first bottle that just like blew me away as a wine.
What was that?
That was a 1978 Barbera d'Alba from Giacomo Conterno.
Well, I mean, I can see. I mean, know anything about, and it probably wasn't even that expensive back then. But if you know anything about wine,
it was like $8.
Yeah.
And I remember, because we were just buying grad student wines, and I was at the very first Whole Foods. There was only one at the time.
They weren't even they weren't
Austin.
planning to be what they are today. They just like, we like organic food. We're a bunch of hippies. Let's start a food.
And I think we were probably having like spaghetti. And
Yeah.
I'll get an Italian red, and I innocently bought that bottle, not knowing anything about the producer, and it was just great. Yeah. And I thought, again, as I did with that bistro meal, this is so much better than what I'm used to. I have to have this experience again and again, and I've had that, whether with a Domaine Le Fleuve, Les Pucelles, Pouligny. Wow, that's white Burgundy. Oh, having had my share of great white Burgundies and having like a Coche, Perrier, and it's like, oh my God.
Right, that's what the hype's about.
Or even Genta's Côte Rôtie, 1988, that, I mean, that's really, the Northern Rhone is kind of my jam.
That's your jam?
Yeah.
That's your shit? I'm a Southern Rhone guy, but I do appreciate the savoriness that those guys get, it is just.
But when I was learning about wine, I didn't learn from the top down. I mean, I really learned from the bottom up. There was no, university wine society like you might have had if you came up in the UK,
right.
or my parents didn't open a bottle of Great Burgundy for me. So the first time I sat up, and said, "Oh my God, this is amazing." The first Burgundy was an Haute Côte de Nuit. Yeah. Or the first, I do remember the first Riesling, a J.J. Prum, Grachar Himmelreich. But these were kind of organic. Elevations each time of a new and different style, and I was very much influenced by things that I read, not wine literature, but like if you're reading a novel. I remember reading a novel, The Winds of War, and they're in German and drinking with a Moselle wine, which is what they called it. Yeah. And what's a Moselle? Right. Oh wow, this is great.
Right. Yeah, it's so cool, so cool. Oh my God, Eric! Wow, we'll have to have you back if we can stay on the air. No, I'm just kidding. We'll be on the air. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for coming. Tell people where they can find you and how they can be a part of what you're doing.
I'm on Twitter at Eric Asimov, same on Instagram. You can find me in the New York Times, just at nytimes.com in the food section. Or if you buy the actual newspaper, my column's in it every Wednesday.
Awesome. Well, oh my God. Thank you so much for being here, Eric. And all you guys out there, until the next time, cheers to the Mavericks, the philosophers, deep thinkers. We got a lot of that today. And of course, cheers to all you wine drinkers.
Oh, that was fun.
That was fun. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.